Perfect. November 2022. We're almost there for the year. One more session after this one, Unconvention Night, and I think we've got a few people lined up to speak. I think it's Dan and Todd, but I think if anyone else is keen, let me get to that part of the slides. If anyone else is keen, put their hand up. First of all, big thank you out to our sponsors. So without these guys, this would not be possible. So Codify, kind of chip in for the beer and the pizza. It's great for all of you online. Come in because you get beer and pizza. It's great, and good pizza, not rubbish pizza. And Microsoft. So without Microsoft, this couldn't be possible. So big thank you to those guys for the room and for helping us out with these things. It's always great to have that help here. So December, we do have a few people that are tentatively putting their hands up. Maybe not locked in yet. I'm looking at Dan. I won't be here, but Dan's going to run the whole thing. If anyone wants to do a small talk, now's your time, because the Unconvention Night is all about people getting up, 10-minute talk. What are you doing with Azure? What are you using? How are you finding it? You know, you can jump up, say a few words. There's lots of people here who could possibly jump up and do a bit of a presentation. Doesn't have to be amazing. It doesn't have to be the latest technology, right? So it's more about what are your experiences. If nobody puts their hand up, I think we're going to dob Dan in. And I think Todd said he might do something. But we'd really love the community to get more involved. So let us know if you're keen. All right, so we're going to throw it over to Dan to talk about the job opportunity at Deloitte.
Absolutely. So if you're looking for a new opportunity, Deloitte, of course, as you know, it's one of the big four. And
That'll make or break Christmas. Likely. One part.
Just let me get rid of that, whatever that is.
Oh, it's all good.
Oh, okay. Did you just stop it, did you?
It was over here. It was over here.
yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, we're on the right.
Yeah, sorry about that. Who was? Oh, yeah, Deloitte, of course, obviously one of the big four. Probably Deloitte's known mostly for its auditing and financial assistance, but actually the largest part of Deloitte is its consulting business. And we have great teams in there. We've got a great Azure capability in there, but we also have MuleSoft and AWS and all of that as well. So if you're really interested in a new opportunity, there are opportunities because we have so many clients now, big clients, that we could use some real talent there. And just so you know, recently, and you all know about the Great Place to Work survey that they do, Deloitte placed number 7 in that list, and we were in fact the only consulting company that made the top 10. So it is an absolutely phenomenal place, a really wonderful culture to work with. So yeah, if you're interested in that, you can talk to me. You can scan that QR code or reach out to Danica. Yeah, absolutely. Love to hear from you.
And there's a lot of great guys in Deloitte.
Yeah,
I know them well. And
don't take me as an example.
Dan's a great guy. Don't worry about that. All right, so I'm going to give you a selection of updates. So, you know, we've all seen, there's been a few things updated in Azure recently with Ignite and all that sort of stuff. So this is kind of like the bits that I found interesting. There's a lot more. So one of the few things, you know, we'll start off with a few GAs. So DNS private resolver, if you want to have that private DNS set up, it seems like a really good product, and it would massively simplify your life if you're trying to set up private DNSs. Azure Savings Plan. This was one of the ones that tweaked my interest. It does work with, so I'm sort of Azure and very much a web developer at the same time. So I've got app service up here because that's what I like. There are a lot of other things. So virtual machines, dedicated hosts, container instances, which is a good one. Functions, another good one. But just for an example, I've got some information up here on what it'll save. So it's like reserved instances, but you get a bit more flexibility. You're allowed to spread it across a greater amount of resources. And it's very easy to set up a savings plan in Azure. You can set it up in your RG. So you can target small things or you can target larger subscriptions. So it's really good. It's not all of the subscriptions are eligible. I think there's about 3 I think that it works with. You probably need an enterprise one, but it's really good. So disks, so SSD v2 that came along. That's GA now. So there's a bit of a comparison with UltraDisk SSD v2 and then the premium SSD. So it's like in the middle of the range there, and that's a really good option. UltraDisk, you may not want that for everything. It may not be the right one, but this one here is definitely more accessible for things that you might be looking into. So Elastic SAN. Now this kind of blew me away. It's like, wow, you know, getting the SAN in the cloud, connected into your organization. You've got some pretty good IOPS that you can connect through. It may not be for everyone, but it's a pretty decent start into that sort of cloud. I think Microsoft is the only large cloud provider that's providing the Elastic SAN. So it's definitely worth looking into. IP protection. So for those smaller organizations that you just want to put a bit of IP protection on a single IP address, DDoS protection on a single IP address. This is a really cost-effective approach to get some, big, heavyweight industry scale DDoS protection for a single IP address. So it's worth looking into if that's something you'll look at. This one was an interesting one. So, being able to assign different IPs based on credentials that you're logging in with, and an easy transition into, adopting some of the Azure virtual WAN resources. That seemed interesting to me. And then finally, this one, so I'm always troubleshooting. It feels like it anyway. It seems to be most of the time. But if you're doing a lot of networking, this one here seems to add a lot more tools that you can actually use to get a bit more outcomes. So it's definitely worth checking out. All right. Finally, and not last, I'm really keen to hear about Defender for DevOps. It's the thing I've been waiting for a long time. So I'm really keen to learn more about it. And I'm going to let Sam talk about that later tonight. Just a few events that we've got. So Brisbane Data, Power BI and AI Bootcamp. So if that's of interest to you, check that out. And that there is in Brisbane. We've had a few sessions in there. DDD Brisbane. So another good one. Definitely check that out. And YOW is coming along in Brisbane as well. Oh. All right. And there is an event that's going on right now, but it's probably too late to get involved in it. .NET, if you're looking at .NET Concept is on now. Probably worth checking out too. All right. So Slack, YouTube, and some learning resources. They're all great to check out. And a few blogs that I look at. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ezhilarasi. I hope I haven't butchered that name too badly. And I'm going to need some help in how to switch that over. So she's going to, she's a lead product consultant, and she's going to give us a talk about Azure Integration Services and how they abstract the complexities. So it's a virtual presentation, so we're going to hand over online.
Yeah. Okay. Also, I just want to finish by saying that as every month, this slide deck will be shared on the meetup. Just look for it in a couple of days in time, so that you can download all these slides.
Actually, and I'll just preemptively do the introduction to Sam as well, because we're going to lose the slides. So Sam, CSA for Microsoft. We want to talk you up, don't we, Sam?
Try.
Oh, we are. He's going to present the wonderful Defender for DevOps offering that is going to help everyone out with who are using Azure DevOps.
Yes. Awesome. Okay. So as I cut over, hopefully this will go smoothly.
Awesome. So very good evening, listeners. Thanks for joining me here and giving me an opportunity to share my knowledge that I have acquired by working with enterprises on Azure. So today I'm going to share the secret behind building a reactive application in Azure Integration. So I am a lead product consultant of the product Serverless 360, which is a solution built in Azure for Azure monitoring. And I represent here my organization, Kowai.co. So we build global products for enterprise standards from a tier 2 city in India, Coimbatore, and we are headquartered at London. I am a certified professional by Microsoft and Microsoft certified trainer. So with this introduction, let's get into the topic of today. So I'm going to get started with a bit of history on how the applications have been evolving. So we have been working with a decade back or even back before then. So we had large applications which have been deployed on tens of servers in which it was okay to have seconds of response time and hours of offline maintenance. So they were dealing with the GBs of data. So that is how applications were. And we are lucky to be in this era of application development wherein our applications that we build are deployed on everything and they are running in thousands of multi-core processors at the same point in time. We are expecting milliseconds of response times and 100% uptime for my application that I built. And the data that I am dealing with are in petabytes. So that's how the current applications are. And I'm going to take the help of a reactive manifesto to define the standards of the application and reactive application that I'm going to build. So when do we call an application to be reactive? Which is a need of the modern users, the modern applications that we are dealing with, or the applications that we are building. All these are expected to be reactive. So when I say reactive, what are the features or the characteristics that I expect them to possess when I build an application? I would define the standards for my application to have 4 key features. That is, the application is expected to be responsive. So when we deal with an application, be it we being a user or we are building a solution to meet the enterprise needs of our end users, usability and utility becomes a cornerstone, isn't it? So responsiveness is key and critical when we need our application to be used or utilized by our end users. So what do we mean by responsiveness? The application that I built is expected to detect problem quickly and fix effectively. So the real-time scenario is going to post as a number of challenges which are unexpected or unprecedented. But my application is expected to detect that there is a problem and resolve from it quickly. There should be a rapid and consistent response times irrespective of the environment in which I'm using it or the situation that I am using it. And it has to maintain a consistent quality of service, which in turn is going to build my end user confident and it would encourage their further utilization of the application. So imagine we being the user itself. If the application is not being responsive, am I going to use it further? Definitely not. And the same will hold good for the applications that we build as well. So responsiveness is the key feature or cornerstone of usability and utility of your application that we build. Then we should talk about resilience. So we say that it is expected to detect a failure and recover from it. What should happen in face of a failure? How should my application respond in face of a failure? It should not shut the doors and go off into the dark. Instead, it is expected to respond in face of a failure. It should clearly convey that the system is under trouble at this point in time and this is expected to resolve. So that is how I will have to build my application. So to ensure this, I might have to take care of certain things. Say I might have to replicate my application in different zones or regions in case of we building our application using Azure and deploying it in Azure. So replication is a key to ensure that even if one region of mine goes down, another comes up and then ensures that it is available to my end users. Containment. Say a particular module of my application has got an issue and it is encountering a problem. That issue should be contained within that particular module of my application. I need to contain the failure rather than it impacting the entire application and bringing the entire system down. I need to isolate each and every components of my application, the separation of duties and the impact of failure in one of my components should at any cost should not impact the other components. And what if case one component is undergoing a failure? The resolution should be delegated to another component which is independent of it. So these are four key design references that I need to take care of so my application is resilient in face of a failure. I need to replicate, contain the failure, isolate the components and delegate failure resolution for a failure in one component to another component. And I can deploy my application in a highly available scenario so that even if one of my application goes down, another component would comes up and then serves the end customers. And the most important, in the present modern applications, we are dealing with distributed systems. That is, an application is interacting with multiple other systems to execute and business workflow. Say, for example, I have an SAP system that's interacting with my cloud application and it turn interacts with an IBM Maximo. So, and a typical scenario of wherein I have an ERP system and a CRM system that are interacting with my core business application. So these applications are distributed in nature. And when I define my orchestration, I need to ensure that I'm not putting the burden on the client that to handle the failures. So the application that I build should ensure that the failure is contained within it and it is responsive in face of a failure. And modern applications are ever expanding, isn't it? So my business requirements keep changing and my the traffic that I get or the load that I am facing is going to vary day in and day out. So this elastic expectation defines that my application should be responsive under varying workload. So today I might have very few visitors to my application, maybe, whereas tomorrow, when it is an imagine an e-commerce scenario wherein or there are peak of customers or visitors at specific durations of the year. So my application should be responsive in either cases. That's how I will have to design my application, and it should be in a position, or it should be in a it should have the ability to replicate its components and distribute the load seamlessly, so my end user always has the same experience on working with the application. It should have a predictive and reactive scaling algorithms in place that's going to automatically scale the required infrastructure depending on the incoming load. And I should measure the performance of my application in real time to have an eye on if it is meeting the user's requirements or not. And all this has to be done by keeping in mind that it should be cost effective. So I need to choose the right technology stack or the right solution provider so that I can build a solution that's going to be elastic in nature. And last but not the least, I'm working with distributed systems, isn't it? So wherein there is a need for designing my application to have loosely coupled components, and in that case, asynchronous message processing becomes really critical. Say, imagine I have a front-end web application through which my customers are presented with a list of items that I sell. And when they add the items into the cart and then proceed with purchasing, so there is an order that's getting executed. So I have a backend application which is going to process the orders, and I have a front-end application through which my customers are going to submit their orders or do their purchase. So how do I ensure these two components are loosely coupled and there is a communication between them which is asynchronous in nature? Because at the same point in time, I'm going to have millions of users using my e-commerce application. they will be placing orders, and I have to seamlessly process them using the backend application. So that is where there is a need for this message driven architecture comes into picture, wherein I need to ensure there is asynchronous message passing happening between these two loosely coupled components. And in case of a failure, the failed messages are all delegated to another failover system, which can be processed at this point in time, because every single message here is going to be an order which is business critical for me to be process them within the time. And there should be a non-blocking communication between these two components, irrespective of whether one of the applications is being down or unable to operate at this point in time. Is it offline? The system should keep continuing going on. There should be a reliable messaging service that's going to take care of every order is secured until the backend processor is up and ready to process these orders. So that's how I might have to design my application to ensure that it's a reactive application. So according to the Reactive Manifesto, we understand that when I call my application to be reactive, it is expected to be responsive, resilient, elastic, and message driven. So having defined this criteria for this application, so let us now see how Azure can make my life much easier. What does Azure offer that can help me build reactive applications at ease? So to get started with, when we architecture our solution, Azure does help us with a well-architectured framework that's going to give us the principles that I need to take care of, the 5 core principles that I need to take care of to build a reactive application, or in fact, a reapplication of a well-architectured application, in fact. So here in this case, we are talking about reliability, that is the application should be resilient and available to my end user at any point in time. Cost optimization, I cannot overrun. We did talk about it in the elastic principle of reactive application, wherein I need to have a reliable application, but not overrunning the cost. Operational excellence, that is at real time, my application should be delivered to my end users, and I need to meet the performance expectation of the end user. And above all, the entire application should be secure. So how is Azure helping me do that? So Azure, Microsoft has come up with a well-architectured framework which clearly defines on how I can ensure these core principles are can be achieved. And it also helps me with tools supporting elements that's going to help me achieve this. Say, let me show you a quick glimpse of some of the offerings from here. Say for these purposes, demonstrations, I have a number of real-time scenarios that has been defined in one of my Azure subscriptions. And this Azure Advisor is an utility in the Azure portal itself, which is available for all the Azure users. And you can do and review on your entire subscription to understand where do we stand with the against the core principles defined by a well-architectured framework. Am I running my subscription in a cost-effective way? Is my solution reliable? Can I operate excellent? Is my operational excellence configured on the solution? Is my application high performant? So you can attain an advisor score, and this is really helpful for me to build my application to meet the enterprise standards. And you can also refer to a rich repository of reference architectures based on the solutions that you are working with. You can go through a number of reference architectures that clearly helps me understand how exactly I can utilize a service that is being offered by Microsoft Azure. So what does Azure offers as an enterprise integration platform? So when we deal with real-time business, So a lot of complexities that we had to build solutions by ourselves in the past is now offered to us as a ready to use service. And these services can excellently fit into the real time business needs. So let me talk about some of the services here, which are most often being utilized by a number of enterprises that I work with day in and day out. So my current role being a product consultant invites me to work with the solution architects and Azure developers across business domains, across enterprises. And this gives me an opportunity to understand how do they actually build their business solutions using Azure Integration Services. And my learning is what I share here. So my role would be to understand their enterprise integration application and help them with the right monitoring solution through Serverless 360. So in that journey, what I have found is the service bus has got an excellent set of properties or features that can indeed fit really into the real-time business scenario. Say, for example, say if my business needs to ignore the duplicate messages that are coming in. So if I have to custom build this logic, I don't know how reliable a solution I can come up with, but taking advantage of Azure Service Bus Queue that's being offered by as a part of this enterprise integration platform, I can just enable a property called requires duplicate detection. So enabling this property ensures that any message with the same message ID being fed into the queue within the duplicate deduction time frame window is completely ignored. So, and one major or requirement of my business can be achieved at ease by utilizing an click-through property in an Azure Service Bus queue. So having a clear understanding on the rich feature set that Azure offers, we can choose the right integration service and fit them exactly into our business need to solve an enterprise integration application. So let us see that with an example. So here we have a bunch of resources, and this is ever expanding list. That is, Azure keeps coming up with new solutions. The Logic App Standard is something new, wherein ISE is being replaced by Logic App Standards, a number of integrations now. So Logic App is one of the extensively utilized orchestration service, wherein the number of connectors that we get, it's ever evolving, and you need to stay on top of it to make the best advantage out of the integration services that Azure offers. And Event Grid is something which can connect with any of your service. Say when I want a Logic App to get triggered when a message arrives in the queue, I can use Event Grid in between that can subscribe to the message from and service bus queue, and I can push an event to the Logic App to be auto triggered whenever a message has come in. So decoupling of applications can be achieved at ease by choosing an event router like Event Grid in between. So let us try to understand the strength of these integration services by fitting them into a real-time scenario. So here comes an need for us to understand what our business needs, isn't it? So here is a fleet management system that we are going to design by putting together the enterprise integration services that we found in the previous slide. My business requirement goes like this. So I'm designing a fleet management system wherein my organization has got vehicles or a fleet of vehicles that spread across the globe, and all my vehicles are fit with a telemetry device. It's going to give me information every minute on what is the current position of the vehicle, what speed is it being going on, what is the license status of this particular driver who is driving this vehicle, what is the IFC status of this vehicle. So all the necessary information about the vehicle and the driver who is holding the vehicle, its current position, everything can be retrieved from my telemetry device that has been implanted on all the vehicles that are spread across the globe. So my business also has a legacy code that's right now present in my on-premises of my enterprise. So I need to make it more intelligent by taking advantage of the information that I'm gathering from these telemetry devices. How am I going to make this system more intelligent? I'm going to build a fleet management system around this legacy logic that is present in my premise. So what are all the various components I might need to make this fulfill this business need? The telematic devices are going to send out stream of events every minute, which has got rich information about all the necessary details of the vehicle. So I need an cloud service, which is an event ingester that can accept and store these incoming event data. So I'm looking for an event ingester service here, which can store the information into an cloud storage service that should be accessible to my on-premise application. And this on-premise application is expected to interact with my cloud services as well, isn't it? So how will my on-premise application know that the data that it is looking for has arrived into the storage? So for which I need to establish some connectivity for this on-prem solution to the cloud so that I can let this on-prem application know that the data that you are looking for has come in and now you can access it. And this on-prem application is going to process this information for further executions, and it is expecting a database into which it can save its information. And what are the properties that I am expecting from the database? It should be a responsive database with business continuity and enterprise grade security in place. So I'm exposing my on-prem application through a cloud service. So how do I receive the event arrival notification from my event ingester? So I need an event routing service to meet the massive scale requirement, because I do not know I have got vehicles across the globe, and there is I'm expecting a massive volume of information that's going to flow through, and I need an event routing service that can seamlessly scale and route the event that's being generated from my event ingester to the on-prem application exposed to cloud. So these are all my requirements. So I can also I also have an requirement to orchestrate a follow-up action with connections through third-party applications. So based on the information that has been gathered, I need an orchestrator which is going to interact with third-party solutions and come up with the follow-up actions. And a messaging service that's going to completely decouple the actions from the business. Yes, so this is an entire fleet management system that I am planning to design. And what are all the services that can really fit into this requirement is what we are going to put together. So here is my choice of services that's going to fit into this scenario. So I can put Event Hub as an event ingester that can ingest the stream of events that's coming from my telematic devices. And Event Hub is capable of handling massive scale of events that's coming in. And it also has a feature called capture. In the turn of a switch button, you can ensure that all these stream of event data is captured into your designated storage, which can be a storage blob or a data lake. So in this case, I have selected an Azure storage blob into which the stream of telematic data events are captured. And at the same point in time, I wanted to expose my on-prem solution to the cloud. So this project we did a few years back, and at that point in time, we chose and relay to expose on-prem service to the cloud. An alternate here would be an APIM through which you can expose your on-prem cloud application, on-prem application to the cloud. And here I have an event grid that plays the role of an event routing service. It picks up the event from the event hub. The event hub emits an event to the event grid saying the capture file is created now, and the event grid passes this event from the event hub to the relay, which exposes my on-prem solution. My on-prem solution processes this information and saves it into Cosmos DB, which is a fully managed NoSQL DB, which can store the data here. And this also emits a message to an service bus queue, and this logic app is listening to the queue for enable of a new message, and it picks the message for further processing. And Logic App, as we know, is capable of connecting to third-party solutions seamlessly. So this application is entirely built using Azure Integration Services. And as you see here, these services really fit into the business need of my enterprise business application. So down the line, few years down the line, the customer also decided to replace the on-prem solution using an compute service from Azure itself, which allowed them to put in their custom business logic. So their ultimate choice was a durable function, wherein they had a number of Azure functions orchestrated using an orchestrative function to define their custom compute requirement without disturbing the rest of the solution. So that is the elastic feature that I was expecting, wherein the solution can expand without impacting the rest of the components. So that's how this reactive application was built, by putting together the reliable services from Azure Enterprise Integration Platform Suite. But when it comes to supporting this application in real time, so it was also necessary for us to define a frictionless support strategy. So as you build reliable solutions using Azure, we also expect you to be aware of certain challenges that you might encounter as you start supporting them in real-time business. So some of them to be aware of is monitoring and observability, distributed tracing, cost control, and governance and auditing. Now, let me show you what do I mean by monitoring and observability. So here is a bunch of resources that I have created to fulfill my business requirement. So I have a number of logic apps, and as I keep building more and more business applications, this Azure footprint of mine is ever evolving. But what I see as a challenge, number one, I cannot this portal is understandable and accessible only to people who has got adequate knowledge on the Azure portal. And it lacks observability. That is, if I want to delegate my support to my support team, they are unable to infer the status of my resources from here, or they don't get the context of actually failure in this API connection would lead to which application will this failure impact. So they don't get an application like view in the Azure portal. So that is what we call as lack of observability. And there is a need for distributed tracing. So as we saw in the scenario that we discussed, the message started flowing from telematic device. It went into Event Hub, through Event Grid into an on-prem solution, and then to a logic app. So this is how real-time applications are. So as they grow complex, there is a need for an end-to-end tracking of the message that's flowing through these components. I need to get a clear picture of what happened to a particular vehicle. How do I trace it? How do I spotlight where exactly this tracking has failed? So that information is hard to achieve without distributed tracing in place. So there is a need for distributed tracing to get an end-to-end visibility of the message flowing through these distributed components. Keeping the cost in control. How fast is my Azure evolving? How do we have an eye on which subscription is consuming the most, or which resource type is taking the most? How do I set a budget and ensure that my team does not exceed beyond it? All these are subcritical requirements. And most importantly, many enterprises are not comfortable in providing direct access on the Azure portal to the entire Azure team, say entire support team or operations team. So that is where there is a need for encapsulating the underlying complexities and giving an operation-friendly interface to the end users. And even when you give access to your business users or support users through an operation-friendly interface, it's necessary to govern and audit the operations or actions that they take on your underlying Azure services. So these are certain factors that would ultimately lead into an elevated total cost of ownership on your entire Azure applications. We need to understand further on what do we know, say as the total cost of ownership, and how this challenge is leading to elevation of the total cost of ownership. So imagine this has been a typical support escalation path, a number of enterprises that we have worked with. There could be some changes depending on in the which phase of cloud maturity model are they in. Say modernization of applications are being carried out, in which you'll have an site reliability engineer taking the role of a support person, or there could be cloud economists who are dedicatedly looking at cost optimization on your resources. But still, in many enterprises, we observe that there are business users who take care of client-facing role, wherein they need to respond to customers looking for what happened to my transaction. And there are support teams who ensure that the infrastructure is up and running, and they need to resolve any issues proactively. But the lack of visibility on the Azure portal is restricting the support team to take up the support tasks. And what ultimately happens is the support overload is pushed into the skilled Azure team who are unable to focus on business innovation. Because what we observed through our engagement is 90% of the issues that happen in production are related to or functional or data errors, which can very well be offloaded to the support team, provided they have the right tool with an operation-friendly interface to understand and resolve the errors. So that is where we defined Serverless 360, which has got 4 core modules that can help the support and business users the right way to spotlight an issue and resolve them efficiently. Yes, so this has successfully proven to offload the support from a number of enterprises across business domains. Around 75% of the support from the Azure team can be safely offloaded to your support and business users by having Serverless 360 in place. So this is an typical scenario where the support is entirely based on Azure offered native solutions, wherein the business users do not have an idea on what has happened to their business process or where exactly is it broken. But giving them an visibility through Serverless 360 can help them react to a problem, that rather than reacting to a problem, being proactive. They can identify any issue with the underlying service on the business application dashboard. Say in contrast to this dashboard in Azure portal, what we get in Serverless 360 is an dashboard that clearly segregates your resources based on their business requirement and gives me an instant feedback on the status of the resources. It also gives you the tool set to resolve the issues. So in this case, I find that my business application has got an issue and I get the assistance to spotlight where exactly the problem is, what exactly the problem is. Count of dead letters is a problem, which means a number of orders have not been processed. And I get the right tool set to resolve this error, as this tool allows me to reprocess the message in my service bus queue. So this way I can enable my team to visualize the application, spotlight the issue, and give them the right tool set to resolve the issue. It is also possible to automate your resolution by defining an intelligent automated task for resolving it. So it also offers 4 different modules that can fulfill the need of different stakeholders that are dealing with our business application. And say I can achieve end-to-end traceability of the message. I can document my entire subscription. For a cloud economist, there is a dedicated cloud cost analyzer module that can give you insight on where do we spend, how much do we spend, what is the expected spend. I can set optimization schedule to shut down the resources when it is not required. I can monitor my spending based on an alert. And I can achieve end-to-end tracking of the message that's flowing through, which allows me to spotlight at which stage my transaction has failed. Is there anything that needs my action right here? For all these reasons is why Microsoft itself recommends Serverless 360 in their co-sell platform as well as in the marketplace. It is available for people to take advantage of it and redefine your support strategy to achieve operational excellence. So a quick summary of whatever we saw till now. We defined standards for our application, for our reactive application, taking help from the reactive manifesto. And we analyzed how can we build to meet the business needs by choosing the right serverless services from Azure and adhering to the best practices, well-architectured framework, and define and frictionless support strategy for the application that we built. I also have got a number of interesting demos on these integration scenarios, hybrid applications, applications that integrate with the SAP system and IBM Maximo, and real-time scenarios. And that, with help from my friend Michael Stephenson, we have documented this entire demo setup in and that this is a link wherein you can get into each of the demos and then understand the business stack behind them. So how have we defined or built this application by adhering to the well-architectured framework and by choosing the right services from Azure, and how these can be operated efficiently by using solutions from Serverless 360. So we would highly appreciate you going through this and leaving us your comments there. We also do a number of community activities. Azure on Air is a podcast series wherein we have 20+ episodes wherein we have brought industry experts. Even Dan has done a wonderful session with us about event-driven integrations. So you can explore a rich set of sessions from podcast sessions that's available in our website, wherein you can learn from the industry experts on how Azure is being utilized for their solutions. We also run a YouTube series wherein we talk about real-time challenges that users face when dealing with Azure and how we can be resolved. We have given solutions to real-time business challenges and solutions here. And Serverless Notes is an excellent place wherein you can find tips from industry experts on serverless services. So that brings us to the end of this session. Thank you for listening to me. I hope I delivered you a valuable content for this evening. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll make this quick while it still works. So thanks for the introduction, Damien. So my name is Sam Bell, and I am a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. So in the building, and also if we work together, feel free to reach out. But this presentation is going to be quite loose. I haven't really structured it too well. It's also presentation down. It's interesting because exactly a year ago when I first started at Microsoft, I did a presentation on container security, and that was using Trivy, which is an open source container scanning tool, which has actually come full circle. So the reason why I reached out to Damien and the team to do this presentation today was because of that fact. It's quite interesting. So if you're keen on the history, you can actually go to the user group, go to the YouTube page, and you can actually go and see the initial video. And that initial video goes into detail about how some of the Defender for DevOps components work. So it's actually where that kind of incubated and started was what the previous talk was. So I want to use this as a talk to kind of come full circle about what Defender for DevOps is. So first of all, agenda, a little slow. Really simple agenda. First of all, we're going to talk about Defender for Cloud. Reason being is because we have to get context about where the data is going to sit and why this new Defender for DevOps suite is important. What were the gaps that are being filled now by Defender for DevOps? And we'll also, not that it's listed, we'll also have a bit of a demo. We'll try to break one of my environments, see what happens. But yep, kick off. We'll go into Defender for Cloud. So great question. What is Defender for Cloud? Now this is straight from the portal because it's very much a mouthful. But Defender for Cloud is a cloud security posture management and cloud workload protection platform for Azure, on-premises, and multi-cloud. And it's really broken down into 3 key features. The first one is continually CSS, And part of continuously assessing is to understand what your current security posture is, right? So Defender for Cloud provides you a security score. And that security score is a way for you to quantifiably measure your current security posture. You get a number based on the services you've got turned on and based on the recommendations that we've identified for you to harden those services. But essentially get a number that you can start measuring your improvements or where you're failing in or ways you can get better. The next aspect of it is secure. So part of that secure score and the fact that we understand what is misconfigured allows us to then provide recommendations on how to configure it. Now, some of those recommendations can be automatic. So you can actually go into the Defender for Cloud portal and you can actually trigger an auto remediation on some things. Yeah, there's a little lightning bolt, I believe, next to some of the recommendations. But the idea here is that you're now getting active hardening advice for how to resolve issues with those services. And, you know, it might be a little bit small to read, but it also includes recommendations for AWS stuff as well. So it's no longer just a portal for Azure. We're really trying to make it so that you can get AWS, GCP, on-premise, and Azure data into a single portal to then manage everything. And the cool thing is on the secure aspect is everything that comes into Defender for Cloud can actually be exported overseas. So the data can go to an event hub, which can then be filtered out to wherever you like. But by default, you know, our ecosystem, we support publishing as straight sense. So the whole thing works together because it's all made for each other. Now, the third and one of the most important features is Defend, which is where the Defender for DevOps sits in this whole hierarchy. Now, the idea of Defend is to be able to proactively respond to incidents when they occur. So Defend, which we'll go and have a look at, actually has certain products that it specifically specializes in. So you can think of it like Defender for containers, Defender for servers. And they all have their own specific niche differences in what they actually provide that service. Yep, so speed run this bit, but again, those three things we mentioned, continuously assessing. We've got our security as a security score. We've then got vulnerability assessment happening. So if we're using Defender for containers, do we have any vulnerable containers running? If we've got any OS level vulnerabilities, it provides that kind of advice. It's continually assessing our state. We then have regulatory compliance. Quite important, especially if you're in PCI DSS requirements, but Defender for Cloud actually has, I guess, in the back, it's using Azure policy. It's got some predefined rules that align to specific regulatory compliances. You can actually, in the portal, see how you're progressing against those regulatory compliance statuses. And finally, an asset inventory. It's a little boring, but we all need one, especially when we've got VMs. So secure, middle one. Remember, security recommendations, essentially advice on how to harden our resources. We can also get just-in-time VM access, which is pretty cool, a little different to having a bastion in the environment. We then have adaptive network hardening and then adaptive application controls. But essentially, we're getting those recommendations on how we can secure our workloads. And the good thing is it's recommendations that are tangible and sometimes automatable. It's a mouthful. Now, Defender. So Defender comes with Microsoft Defender. That's a good slide point. But essentially, we get our security alerts that allow us to actually respond to an event. So you can visualize those alerts, you can send them somewhere to do something with them, or you can essentially publish them straight into Sentinel and have Sentinel absorb everything and be your single point for alerting on events. But left down at the bottom here, it needs to explicitly be enabled for some services. There is a cost involved. You turn on Defender for Server, there's a cost. Now, the elephant in the room for Defender for DevOps, currently there is no cost. I believe there will be costs eventually once it comes out of public preview, but it won't be for the entire product. So I think certain features of the product still to be decided will be free. There will be some more advanced features that will come with a cost. But for right now, if anyone's interested, you can add the extension and try it out yourself right now for free. Now, really, I just want to take some time to quickly look at the Defender for Cloud portal. Now, this is because if my demo fails, we at least saw something. Now, yeah, thank you. This is it, guys. Look, as I mentioned, right, we got what's the laser pointer, don't I? We got our Azure subscriptions, right? These are subscriptions in Azure, but we've also got our AWS accounts and our GCP projects. Again, reiterating that point of a single portal for 3 major public clouds. But left myself some reminders here. First one is security posture. Been talking about that before as a continuously assessing. We have in the security posture what our secure score is. So my example, I am a measly 39%. That's pretty rubbish. But we can see that score across all 3 of the clouds. But we can also see the recommendations. Remember about how we can actually secure everything. We can see the total amount of recommendations that we have, how many are overdue, and also how many are unassigned. Next important bit, active recommendations. So we're actually seeing all of these different clouds and all the different resources that are in my scope. So this view doesn't have to show you everything. You can see, getting that laser pointer. You can see the subscription section here. I can scope this portal to a single subscription if I'd like, or to individual resources. So we can change the scope from it being everything in Azure to maybe focusing on a new subscription that's being created, a new landing zone or something. Next one we've got is security alerts. These are alerts of events happening. Remember, we're talking about the defend section. These are our proactive alerts for something that's happened. Maybe when we're talking about Defender for Containers recently got updated to have runtime protection included. So maybe there's an event happening in my AKS cluster. So this is now an alert that can be generated here to give you real-time information about what's happening. And my final little prompt is regulatory compliance. Now, again, if you're in the industry, you know you're in the industry. And here's the different compliances that are out of the box. It can usually be quite hard to make sure that you are meeting these requirements, and having something out of the box that allows you to measure it and work towards improving it, and have that quantifiable data, to me is awesome. Makes my life easier. Now, I promised that I would talk about Defender capabilities. So within Defender, this is a little slide I made, but this is how I current plans you can turn on within the Defender portal. So essentially, we've got our database sections. So we have SQL, MySQL, Postgres, MariaDB, and Cosmos. So they all have an option to turn on Defender. Now, one thing to note is that when you turn Defender on for a subscription for one of these plans, you're turning it on essentially for the entire subscription. So all of the resources for that plan type for the entire subscription. There are some controls. So when you go and turn on the database plan, for example, you can say, hey, only do Postgres. Maybe I don't care about MySQL. But the reason why I want to give that backstory and the reason why I've included this is there's a gap. And from a lot of the buzzwords and all these presentations people have been doing, everyone's been talking about shifting left. And so there's been a massive gap in Defender capability because we want to catch vulnerabilities before they're created. We want to make sure that our resources are secure before they're even created, because it's easier to remediate something and deny it being created when no one's actually using it. So it helps everyone in that regard. So that's where our Defender for DevOps comes in. And again, Defender for DevOps is now going to fill a void that we've had in the Defender suite for a while, where it's not just maybe assessing infrastructure as code. We're going to look in those Git repos for credentials, right? Maybe there's clear text passwords, which is a very common event. But there's also some other stuff, which we're going to dive into a little bit more. Into our Defender for DevOps section. Now, again, ripped this one right out of the portal because it's more articulate than I'll ever be. Now, the way it describes the Defender for DevOps suite is a central console to empower security teams with the ability to protect applications. So we're focusing on application code there in the wording, and resources, so infrastructure as code processes, templates across multiple clouds, multiple pipelines, across GitHub and Azure DevOps. Did not read that verbatim, but we get the point, right? We can protect with Azure, with Defender for DevOps, we can protect our application code. And that can be not just looking at the code for vulnerabilities. So there are certain languages, and I've got that included in the next slide. You can also look for clear text credentials. Maybe someone's got a password in a config file. Maybe someone's accidentally committed a .env file. These things happen, right? And we need to catch them before they're merged and be aware of them. Because if it's in your Git history and you never see it, well, if someone ever clones that repo, or if someone ever takes control of a device that's gone missing, they'll have a password to your system. So we really want to shift left with our testing, and it can't just be infrastructure as code. So Defender for DevOps Suite has a lot of this built into it. The capabilities. So one of the things it provides is unified visibility into the DevOps security posture. To me, what I see a lot with customers, and even just my personal experience as being someone building on the cloud, is we get told to advise people to create the CI/CD pipelines, to do the scanning, to add in all this goodness on the left. But sometimes you never really do anything with the data. The pipeline itself may scan for infrastructure as code, but you maybe have 50 different projects doing infrastructure as code. Do you ever actually grab the telemetry from all those pipelines and put it into a single repo? Do you ever have an area where you can actually query what's happening with your pipelines across projects, across GitHub, across Azure DevOps? And that's one of the things that Defender for DevOps is bringing, is unified visibility. You can now have all of your data, not just for container scanning, infrastructure as code, secrets and code. You can have all of that now across these two different awesome tools in one area. Next thing is to strengthen Azure Cloud resource configurations during the development cycle. Defender for DevOps can be a status check on a pull request. You could say, hey, before you merge your code, of course we want to have peer reviews, but let's just add a little check-in so that every time someone tries to merge code into our main branch, it's got to pass the Defender for DevOps check. The Defender for DevOps will have a look at the YAML in a moment, has a little switch that says break, true or false, default's true. If you're still implementing it, maybe you can start off with false, start going through the findings, but you have some options there. The idea here is that, again, before a project starts, before it starts consuming resources on Azure, we want to make sure it's secure at the start. It's easier to fix it. It's very hard to fix something that's 2 weeks before go live. And finally, prioritizing remediation of critical code issues. You actually get a list of what the issues are and how to remediate. You get actionable feedback. And that's the thing I'm really excited about, is the actionable feedback component of this. Now, feedback is broken down into different tools and it's presented in different ways, but you still have actionable feedback you can use to remediate critical code issues. Now, kind of been dancing around it, but I want to be really specific with what it does. Now, at a high level, what it does is it scans for secrets. So credentials linked in source code. There is specific file extensions it looks for right now. There is features coming that will increase that capability. It also scans infrastructure as code. Now, in the infrastructure as code piece, I kind of just grouped all infrastructure as code. Very specifically Bicep and ARM, so Azure stuff. There's also a capability of scanning Terraform. Now, I also use Kubernetes manifests and Helm charts, which is templating of Kubernetes manifests as infrastructure as code, but that might be debatable. But we're also going to be not just assessing our cloud infrastructure as code, but also our containerized templates infrastructure as code for best practices. A really cool one there is you can actually assess Docker files. Looking for best practices, looking if containers running as root. So again, that same concept of when we're talking about making sure we capture infrastructure as code misconfigurations on the left, we can do the same thing with our containers. You've got a manifest and someone leaves it running as root. You run the infrastructure as code scan as part of Defender DevOps, and it will tell you, and it will fail the build because there is really, for the most part, no need to run a container. But lucky last one at the end there, you got cloud formation as well, which is awesome. So we can also do some scanning for cloud formation as well. So it's no longer just Azure own tools, which is pretty cool. Now, I've mentioned Docker files. So Docker files being the manifest on how to build a container image. But maybe once that image is built, maybe the manifest complies to some best practices and recommendations. But what about the actual container image itself?
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
How does the credentials show up? How does a secret or a credential show up in some of that stuff? Is it looking for the word password equals, or is it got a templated set of things it looks for?
It's got a predefined regex expression that it passes over certain ones. It's probably not, yeah. It's it's looking for specific sequences of characters that are well known that could be credentials.
Yeah.
Does that help at all?
Sort of.
It basically does, it does password equal blah, but instead of looking for password equals and then a value, it basically, those values can be certain sets of characters, and the characters can be compiled in a certain way. So they're usually organized in certain length, for example. So it's actually going through and looking at all of your files, and not just looking at the key value, it's looking at the entire file for a string, so a set of characters that meets that requirement. So it's not perfect.
Like I say, so it could get false positive.
Definitely can get false positives. Yeah, it's definitely an emerging space. From what I've seen, the scanning out of the Defender for DevOps is based on, I think this is all on the public repo, so I'm not saying anything under NDA, but it's actually based on a credential scan tool called CredScan that Microsoft has been using in the background for many years. So it's well versed on picking up Azure specific secrets. We trained it because we have a specific way we generate our secrets, but it does pick up username, passwords, and some common secrets. Does that?
Yeah. Every one of those things are different, right?
Yeah.
The structure of the stuff is some are YAML, some are
Yeah.
all different. So just wondering how to do it.
Yeah, that's fair, mate. And the truth is I mentioned at the start, I did a presentation about Trivy and the integration for container scanning last year at this user group. Well, all of this is actually just a combination of different tools. Microsoft didn't go and write one tool to do everything. This is a different tool for secret scanning. We've got CredScan, which is the internal Microsoft tool that's now available. We've now got infrastructure as code scanning through best practice analyzer. There's TerraScan, which is doing the Terraform code. So basically, most of these are actually open source tools that instead of you needing to configure into a single area, standardize the output, you can now call from Microsoft that we're going to keep adding to. So you're right, they're definitely different tools that have been combined into a single really experience. And that talks to a good point, which is a lot of customers didn't know what tools to turn on. It's like you might be doing infrastructure as code scanning for your bicep and arm, but maybe you're missing Kubernetes and your Helm templates. Or maybe you didn't have your credential scanning, but you had container image scanning going on. So now it's just, hey, here's all your scanning in one go. It kind of simplifies that experience. And again, brings all the output into a central area. So the last two here, we've got container images. So container images aren't just the vulnerabilities of the operating system of that container. So when you're running a container, you usually have it from something. So Ubuntu, Alpine Linux, different base images that you could have it come from. Now, that base image you got might have an OS level vulnerability in it. But Trivy also, so Trivy is the container scanner behind this. Trivy also scans for application dependencies. So heavens forbid anyone uses JavaScript, but if you're using JavaScript, there could be a lot of vulnerabilities from your dependencies. And this will pick up JavaScript dependencies in a container. And finally, the code ones, there's very specific implementations for each of them. The code scanning isn't done by one specific tool, it's done by quite a few. And I can't remember the tool off the top of my head for the code scanning ones. But we'll act like I did. So, yep.
Yeah. Package vulnerability scanning.
Yes, sir.
Is that included? Is that what you're going to ask?
I'm like the
Like what's
node
called
package?
just NPM.
And yeah, as part of trading
Audits, you can do something. So,
outside of container scanning, so natively,
yes,
not right now.
on the roadmap or?
I'll might leave that to the boss.
Good question. I mean, I'm sure it would be included because we have the telemetry there. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure on when, but it's an evolving space, right?
Yeah.
At the moment, it's public preview because obviously we wanted to get something out to customers so they could give us feedback on it and sort of let us know, are we hitting the mark? Are we missing like key areas? But I'm sure it will be it'll be like modified based on feedback. But yeah, I mean, I think some of that stuff would automatically be detected in the code scanning, but in terms of like full supply chain for dependencies, I'd say that it'd be something that we're looking at, but it's not currently available. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be really good to get something to ensure that if you've got a high or critical package, it gets updated before that stuff gets checked, as well as doing like a software bill of materials or something like that.
I'm sure something will come through. Like the example on the code section right at the bottom, the JavaScript and TypeScript, parts of it's actually based on ES. So we are trying to actually integrate those tools. So I wouldn't be surprised if something comes out. Was the same question?
Well, yeah, that was we had the same question,
Okay.
basically.
I was going to say, I'm too scared to look in those modules, so I'm glad.
Me too, man. All 500 mega ones?
Yeah. Well, it depends. Depends on which day of the week it is.
Yeah.
If you're using GitHub, the Dependabot can scan something.
Yeah, so good point. So Dependabot is a feature capability of GitHub that will go and look at your dependencies. So in your package.json, if you're using JavaScript, TypeScript, and it'll actually then go and look at the versions and look if there's any node vulnerabilities. So, and cool thing with Dependabot is it will actually create a pull request and say, hey, this is the updated bump, and trigger your CI process for you, which is pretty awesome. It's awesome.
Be nice to get that in GitHub as well, in
Azure
Azure.
DevOps. Yeah.
Git as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and primarily because Azure DevOps much better because it has Azure.
Definitely. I'm not biased by any but look, this section here again, just in case my demo goes away, we have a couple little things we want to focus on. And so this is part of the Defender for DevOps portal, which is inside Defender for Cloud. Right, so we'll have a look at it together. But really, I just want to highlight some key things in case something goes wrong. First one is we have, remember how we said that we can prioritize the findings based on severity. Here's a pre-built, curated view to not just ingest, but to present the data to you. So we can see total vulnerabilities and by type, a single count, which is awesome. Next one, our DevOps security results. So code scanning. Hey, how many vulnerabilities do we find in the code? Or how many exposed secrets are in our repos? And again, the cool thing is this isn't one repo. This is all of your repositories across Azure DevOps and GitHub, which is that centralized view, right? You can have recommendations. So you can have recommendations based on the code, very similar to that concept within Defender for Cloud. We're talking about recommendations on how to secure our resources. You get recommendations here for how to fix up some of the code stuff. So before it's even created too. And finally, OS vulnerabilities. Pretty sure that one's coming from Trivy, the container scanning component. Lucky last is really bringing home that point. So with Defender for DevOps, what you need to do is, and we'll do it, we'll connect to some of my stuff, but you can essentially connect one or more GitHub organizations. When you connect the organization, you can select which repositories are being scanned to look for the data. And the same thing with DevOps. When you connect one or more DevOps organizations, you can select which projects can present the data in. Because maybe, realistically, if you've got CAF applied to the Cloud Adoption Framework, maybe you have an Azure DevOps project that needs to a certain subscription. You don't in some examples, you don't want all your data to come into one subscription. So there is the support to have the data go to different subscriptions. Where does that resource get deployed? Let's create that end-to-end view. Hit home the why is it important, and then we have it. But to me, it's super important because to date, there's been a decoupled view on the CI/CD results. Hey, I had a vulnerability in my container. The pipeline failed, but people have never had that telemetry to know how often the pipeline's failing. And it's actually really hard to talk to the business sometimes without quantifiable data. What were we protecting against? We just spent 6 months having a project to implement CI/CD, big buzzword, but what did that actually give our business? Well, now we can see it across in this holistic view. It also fills the gap in the Defender for Cloud solution. So the gap was we could never see anything on the left. We've now got that end-to-end view to now correct things before they're created, not just what's running. Because again, sometimes it's too hard to remediate something once it's running. Change request processes, humans. Finally, but there was a disconnect between cloud posture management and development. So we had that cloud score, we looked at the security score, mine being 39 in the example, but we never had a view that showed us where we're at from the development level and where we're at from the actual cloud. And finally, last point is there's so many talks about shifting left, having the resources be validated, scanned before they're created. So shift to the right being where it's actually existing, moving to the left. Microsoft has now provided an easier way to do it. Right? We're now empowering you to do the thing we keep telling you to do. But now we're on to a demo. And so now I get to deal with AV again, which is everyone's friend. So, oh yeah, this will do. Oh yeah, I did that by myself too. In case anyone's impressed. Thank you. Be here for another 20. But look, so starting off, this is the, I might zoom in for my eyes, but this is the Defender for Cloud portal, right? Every single Azure subscription will have this portal. You can type it in, top search bar, Defender for Cloud. Now, this is that overview that we were looking at. So my subscription is a little better than in my previous example. But we can see here, a security score, my current posture that I'm being managed, and I'm not really doing anything in the other clouds. But focusing on the Defender for DevOps section. So I'm going to change my subscription. So I didn't prepare for that. Oh, actually, let's jump back to the code quickly. So what I've got is a manual project. I basically have an Azure DevOps pipeline that has the Defender for DevOps integration turned on. So we'll quickly look at it. How easy is it? And then rather than just talking about a centralized portal to view stuff, what does it actually look like in the portal for the CI tool? Because having that iterative feedback is part of that continuous integration process, the whole point of it. In this pipeline, we have my really bad pipeline. And what we can see here is this is just an example I have copy pasted out of the Azure portal. I haven't done anything special. You go to Google, Bing or Google, and you type in Defender for DevOps on Azure. This is the example you get. This isn't anything special. And what it's doing is it's installing the required versions of .NET. Got a few different tools, still consolidating some parts of that. So that's the reason why we have multiple version required, just to be honest. And this is really the important stuff. Now, I have the extension already added to my organization, so I'm not going to walk through this part. But here is basically, this is going to use all of that different capabilities, infrastructure scanning, the cred scanning, and software scanning. But there are some options to specify which ones you would prefer to do. maybe you have your own off-the-shelf tool that does something. You don't have to do everything with this tool, because that's also a confusion point. If you're paying for a tool and then you have another tool giving you conflicting results and you can't mute it or suppress it, that's a problem. So just know that you can do that. And you also have the option to publish the results or not to publish the results. But when we run the pipeline, I won't put you through watching me run it, but we've got the results and the output. We can see here that, hey, there are some findings. So we have a specific number telling us what's wrong. We have a file with a problem, and we have a line in that file that's an issue. So we actually go into the more important stuff. Ignore the fact I have two scans types. I was playing around with something today, but either one will work in our example. Now, what we need to do is, once we have that Defender for DevOps extension added to Azure DevOps organization, you then need to install or add the Serif Scans tab extension, because this gives us the functionality we're about to look at now. So remember how I was mentioning that we have those different tools that are essentially together combined to form Defender for DevOps. You can see it clearly here. It's also outlined in the docs. But we've got Template Analyzer. So Template Analyzer is doing the infrastructure as code scan. We then got our TerraScan. That's doing our Kubernetes, it also does Docker files and Terraform scanning, credential scanning and such. Now, I couldn't actually create a fake credential to put through because the Microsoft system kept blocking me today, but I tried. I got rejected about 3 or 4 times. I couldn't bypass it. But if I had a secret, it would show you. But we can at least look at the findings from the Template Analyzer. So we can see here that this is a unique number we can use to track whether that finding is being addressed. We also have the file specifically that we've got and whether or not it was new. Was it recently detected? But the cool thing is, I promised you actionable feedback. Here is the finding. So you might have noticed that even though it was on the Template Analyzer, it's taken us to a tool called PS Rule for Azure. And that's because the tool behind the tool has a subtool. So Template Analyzer is using PS rules to sum off the infrastructure as code analysis. And we can see in this, here is the specific rule. This is the finding. This is the recommendations on what to do with it. Here are the examples on how to fix it in ARM and Bicep. And here are the relative Azure links. Why we're actually giving you this recommendation. So again, it's actionable feedback. You can do something with this. Now, yeah, shoot.
So that uses PS rule. Does it comply to all the rules and configuration that you can do with PS rule?
Well, so we're actually very lucky. The creator of PS rules is right there. So here's the
so the answer to that.
Fan, just to
So at the moment, we're only pulling in the security pillar.
Okay.
So PS rule for Azure handles the well-architected all 5 pillars. In this case, we're only pulling the security pillar in.
Okay, so you're still going to do PS rule component of it as well.
Yeah, so there's technically an option to enable the other pillars, although it's not documented anywhere and it's not really easy for customers to enable. So technically it's possible, but we need to wait for a documentation update to sort of actually tell you how to do that, right? But yeah, so theoretically it will do all the pillars at some point, but we're working through some documentation updates and some tooling updates and things like that. In terms of the release, the tool is at the moment it's about 108 security rules, and that's was from a little while ago. I think that was about August timeframe, but those rules were there, and they're like in the next 2 weeks or so there'll be a refresh to and include the new security rules that have occurred. But yeah, the other pillars will be coming, but at the moment, yeah, you've pretty well got a choice of if you want to do the other pillars, then you can use PS rule directly, and then just ignore like the security ones. But at some point you'll be able to do everything through one tool. Yeah.
Good question.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and the other thing to note there is that if Defender for DevOps isn't picking something up that you want it to from the security perspective, you can contribute to PS rules and you can get it added into that tool, which it's pretty cool to be able to actively contribute to a Microsoft tool that's used potentially globally. Now, during that handover of Bernie, I managed to find the portal and I also managed to change my subscriptions. So as I mentioned before, there's a scope. I was scoped to my environment where I hadn't set some stuff up. So before I show you what the setup process looks like and then wrap up, really just wanted to show you what some results look like. So this is someone else's demo that I'm stealing. And this is the portal that we're looking at before, right? You can see here the vulnerabilities, high, medium. See the code scanning stuff, we can click into it as well. And then we can see the different organizations in GitHub and Azure DevOps that we have connected. You can kind of scroll down here and we can see the name of the repo, GitHub. See a little octocat. Now we can search for the repo. We can see what's unhealthy about it. Now I haven't done this in a while, so let's go and look at one that says DFD demo because that's got to have some good stuff. And we can see the recommendations. So GitHub repository should have secret scanning enabled. Actually go and look at Defenderbot recommendations. Hey, turn Defenderbot on and actually have it resolve things. We're getting feedback about the configuration of the GitHub repo itself as well, not just the code in it. So we're having that holistic end-to-end view now that we never had. And it's just going to continue to be improved on. So the first item in there is obviously a high severity, but the status is healthy. Yeah, it probably means it hasn't actually been acknowledged and resolved. Because I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Let's have a look. Sorry, Dan, I don't remember curveballs being loud. It's all right. I'll say it. Yeah, I believe it would be something to do with it not actually being marked off. But you're right, it does say it's healthy and it does say it's high severity.
So I think that pretty well means it has been resolved. So like it's no longer an issue. I think it's shown there just because it happened 8 hours ago. So it's still within the filter criteria, but yeah, there you go. But basically it was an issue, somebody already resolved it, which is great. But whoever's obviously monitoring the portal now knows, hey, there was a thing that happened and it's been resolved.
Because it has the security data there. This is visualizing it in a curated fashion. You can query this data yourself. You don't have to just use this portal. Which brings us to my planned section, which is, well, we actually have, go to it. There is actually there is a Defender for DevOps set of workbooks. So an Azure workbook allows you to create a dashboard through code. You can copy it through different environments. You can put in some really cool functionality, but none of these showed what I wanted. We're just going to try this one.
Sorry, got a question.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Are those, is that reporting and the recommendations and resolution all auditable? So you can sort of say, yes, this was actioned at certain times.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, all the data is in that Defender Cloud security option. And then when someone acknowledges it or tries to action the remediation. So again, you can remediate something with some of the automated responses, but every activity on Azure is audited through activity logs as well. You can also see if someone suppresses an alert if they did that.
Yep.
So,
Got a quick question on the GitHub scanning.
Yep.
So you're showing a repo in GitHub, but in order to scan the GitHub, does that mean you hook up GitHub to Azure DevOps and it's still the Azure DevOps tool that scans GitHub? So you've kind of got both Azure DevOps and GitHub, or do you just go straight to GitHub?
it goes straight to GitHub, but this is that part of the demo that I wanted to have my subscription for. But let's just do it quickly, because talking about, hey, this feature does stuff, let's actually walk through what the quick setup is. It's only a couple of minutes and we will then wrap up. I'm changing my filter now so I can only see my subscription, because I should have nothing set up in my subscription. In the Defender for Cloud portal, come down to DevOps security, clearly marked in preview, still going.ga with the service yet. Now I have the option to add connectors. Now I can add a connector for an environment. So these are my the way to set up the connector for the Defender for DevOps area. So I can go straight to GitHub. So I can put in a name, friendly name, which is Sam's demo. It's coming, the data that will be absorbed is going to come into the subscription. Yes, Sam. I then have some appropriately non-standardized resource group names. Thing to note, the data currently can only be installed in, I believe it's 2 different regions. So it's central US. And I think that
Only central US.
is it only central?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where the connector is. The
Yeah.
data will sit wherever your
Your
log analytics workspace is. But yeah, like in terms of the connector, then it's in central US only currently, which obviously is a problem for a lot of Australian customers yet, but it is in preview. So I mean, obviously, as time goes on, the number of regions will expand.
Yeah, so that's only data in transit by US, right? So it's
Yeah.
not data at rest.
It's not, no. It'll be data at rest in your log analytics workspace, which is wherever you've provisioned it.
That's less of a problem. I mean, I feel like having a conversation is still a problem. It's still a problem. But
Well, and that's the reason we're walking through it, right? It's like, hey, not everything's perfect, still working on some stuff.
Yeah.
So you can see here, currently we've only got the option for the free preview plan. When more functionality comes, if stuff becomes paid, you can select what you want to turn off or on. I will select all of it. Now I need to authorize to GitHub. Once I authorize to my GitHub organization, I can then select the different repositories to connect to. Quite subjected to that. It's the exact same process when we're going to be doing it for Azure DevOps. You walk through, you select the plan, you then pick your Azure DevOps organization, then you pick your projects. Then when you start running your pipelines, like we did here, and you've got the publish set up, it will collect that data and store it in the Defender for Cloud section. I'll probably leave the demo there, but out of this, didn't even get close. One thing I do want to show everyone before we wrap up is there is a nifty little workbook, and this workbook is public. So you can install this from the GitHub repo. I'm happy to put a link in for anyone. But this workbook, I think, is awesome. Now, the reason why I think it's awesome is because, yes, you have that curated view in the Defender for Cloud portal. But this shows you that the data is in the background, auditable and alertable within your own tooling. If you have to export the data into your own ITSM tool, well, this is showing you that here are the pre-built queries and doing that. And yeah, so this is the workbook you can import into your environment. It'll read the data from where the Defender for DevOps component is set up, and it shows you everything in a bit more of a curated view. So it's the code component. Secrets, you can scroll down into the different repo. Toy unhealthy, and you can actually see this probably needs a bit of love. You can't see that, I can. But when you hover over it, you can potentially change this to do different ways to present the data. And that's cool because you have the flexibility to display an alert on what's important to you. So in this example, we can see here the type of secret. The description was Azure storage account key. How many times were storage account keys exposed in last month? Actually looking at it by credential leak, by type, by organization, by GitHub bursted. Maybe you want to throw some people under the bus for making some credential mistakes. You now have some telemetry. Yeah.
So does that link to the repo where the secret is?
I don't think so. But you could potentially configure it too, because links within workbooks, you can concat values, so you could turn it into a link if you want.
Okay.
But that's really it. I mean, I think it's pretty cool. It's an emerging space, and it's all free right now, so use it while you can.
Yeah. Then use create a DevOps work item. Do we resolve?
You could. There's no next like automatic option for that. But Microsoft Defender for Cloud has automatic remediation, so you can trigger a logic app, and a logic app could do it.
Yeah. So integrations. Presentation earlier, right? We have the whole integration suite. Logic App is used for a lot of simplified integration automation in a workflow type style. You could have when certain things happen, trigger it, or even an event come through. So although there's nothing natively, you can put that capability in. But last 2 slides, everyone. In summary, Defender for DevOps fills that gap that we didn't quite have covered in Defender for Cloud. We couldn't see the start of the resources being created. We couldn't see if the resources were being created in a secure way. And we don't want to wait until, in the example, a container is running to know there's vulnerabilities. We want to block it before it can be merged, because we want to make sure that anything that runs in the cloud is secure and set up properly. Again, comes with infrastructure as code scanning, secret scanning, code scanning, and also container scanning, scanning the image that's created during the pipeline. We then get our out-of-the-box visualization and recommendations. So it's not just the data being there, you can visualize it and then put it to work. Because you don't want to just absorb data, because that's just costs. You want to actually do something with the data. And finally, the thing I'm super excited about is having the data centralized from CI/CD executions. It's no longer just my pipeline failed because of 1 or 3 of my different ad hoc tools that I have connecting it. It's now the data's coming through, it's holistic, it's in the same language, it's queryable in the same way, and it's simple. That's really it to me. Last one, as I mentioned, Bernie White over here is the creator of PS Rule, which is the engine underlying one of the components. But feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. If you also want to understand how that PS Rule component's working, or even get involved. Again, the Defender for DevOps space is emerging. We are trying to add more rules. But if you've got a use case or you want to contribute, we'd be more than happy to. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Sam. That was awesome. Fantastic. As everybody knows, we always appreciate our speakers and all the effort. And in hindsight, I probably should have gotten a bottle for Bernie as well. Aside from giving a great presentation and all of that is, the amount of work that you guys did at the beginning before most of you were here to get things working was can be very, very. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
So as Damien mentioned, next month, that's our last meeting of the year. That's traditionally our, what do we call it, an unconvention night, right?
Yes.
So we have, I guess, at least 2 speakers for it, but we'd love to have more. It can be very, very short, just an update or something and what you're doing on your project or something you discovered that you think is cool, Azure related, obviously. It doesn't need PowerPoint, it doesn't even necessarily need you to show anything. You just speak about it if you want.
So I might add to that too. It could also be maybe something you're challenged with in your job and you want to talk to a group and have a bit of a conversation too.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to just be you presenting a topic. It's like, hey, I dealt with this problem at work. Here's how I solved it. Anyone got any ideas?
Yeah,
having that conversation.
You got a room full of people here who are probably experts, in at least one aspect of Azure somewhere. So yeah, have an opportunity to share in that. So it'll be a more informal meeting than usual. Yeah, if you can call these formal. So yeah, hope I see. We won't see Damien next month. So I do want to take the opportunity then while he's here to thank Damien for all the excellent work that he does as an organizer. Every single month he prepares that slide deck and gathering all that information for you about what's happened in the last month. And
It's the easy job compared to the administration that Dan has to go through. so really, thank you, Dan.
No, it's my pleasure. So, all right, great. If I can just ask people to take their bottles outside, that'd be awesome. And have a great night, everyone. Hope to see you next month. Thank you.